Hi, Caleb from Brownells here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Brownells exclusive Geissele triggers. So if you're in the market for a new AR-15 trigger, and you've done any research at all, especially on this channel, you know that my favorite triggers by far are the Geissele triggers, when we're talking about the AR-15 specifically. So these two variants here are actually some Brownells exclusives, and they're actually the most affordable Geissele triggers you can find out there. And I'll show you why in just a moment. But let's talk about the two main differences between these two I have in front of me, both being Brownells exclusives. One of them is the BGC, or Brownells Geissele Competition, which is a single stage trigger, which if you're familiar with Geissele, they mostly are famous for their two-stage triggers, but if you want single stage, that's definitely an option for you. So we have that one, and then we have the Brownells Geissele Enhanced. So this is that Geissele trigger, kind of like the SSAE, if you're familiar with that one. If not, we have other content explaining that. But this is a standard two-stage trigger. Now, if you're wondering if you should get a single stage or two-stage trigger, don't let anyone bully you into one or the other. It's personal preference. Get whichever one you like shooting the most. I personally prefer two-stage. I even have two-stage on my bolt guns. But like I said, it's all personal preference. Now, if you have no idea what the difference between single stage and two stage is, I'll show you that as well. So I have this upper right here. This is our cutaway lower receiver. I said upper, I lied. It's a lower receiver. It's the cutaway, so you can kind of see what's going on in the trigger mechanism. So when I go through how to install these, I'm going to use this so you get a really good view, hopefully. I won't put my big hands in the way. So this is your standard mil-spec trigger. Your standard mil-spec trigger is a single stage trigger. And single stage just means that once you start pulling the trigger, that hammer is getting ready to fall. That is the only stage of it. So as we pull this trigger right here, you can see it's moving, and the mil-spec trigger is so bad it almost looks like a two-stage trigger, but that's actually just creep. That's the sear disengaging there, so your hammer is slipping off of your trigger is slipping off of your sear, and then once it clears it, your hammer falls, and that happens all in the first stage. So all one mechanical motion there. That is a single stage trigger. I'm gonna install the two-stage trigger first, so I can go ahead and show you what a two-stage trigger looks like. So what we do is we take it comes with the instructions. We'll put those over there. I'll be your instructions for this process. And if I forget what I'm doing, I'll just reach over there and grab them. Alright, now it comes with this paper in here. Make sure you straighten it out and just kind of get everything out of it. Because what's different between these Brownells exclusive triggers that are more affordable and these standard Geissele triggers are these little retainers right here. Okay, these are what actually retain your hammer pin. So if you look, actually I'll take this one out and then I'll show you. So now that we have this ready to go here, we'll go ahead and take out the mil-spec one, which what you're going to want to do first is punch out your hammer pin. Hammer pin comes out first. I'm just going to do it from the opposite side so you can kind of see it coming out. And I'm just going to grab the hammer because it's under spring tension. And I'm going to push out this pin. And you shouldn't need a hammer for this, just a punch. Alright, so we have that out. Now, let me compare these two hammers real quick. Because if you notice, on your standard mil-spec trigger, as well as your standard Geissele triggers like your SSA, SSAE, SSAEX lightning bow, all that stuff, you have a hole drilled right here. On those other Geissele triggers, you also have that hole. But on this Brownells exclusive one, you do not. So this hole is actually a spring that runs down next to the through hole right here. And on that middle groove in the pin, it actually retains it and keeps it in place. So there's actually a piece of spring steel inside of that hole that keeps this pin in place, okay? On your your Brownells exclusive trigger, you don't have that. There's nothing keeping this pin in. It'll fall straight through. There's no retainer, okay? So the way these are kept in place is that whenever you put the pin in, let's just say it's in the receiver right now, one of these clips go over the side of it, and fits into that groove, and this is what keeps your pin in place. And this is all inside of the receiver. So that's the main difference between these triggers and your standard Geissele triggers. And this is easier to manufacture, obviously, so that's what makes them also more affordable, okay? All right, so we took the hammer out, mil-spec hammer out. Now we can take the trigger out. And what's actually retaining the trigger pin is the legs of this hammer. So when this was in the receiver, these legs were laying on top of the pin, and that pin is in fact grooved, so it was laying in the groove, retaining the pin. And that's how your mil-spec fire control group is retained in there. Alright. And I did let that old pin fall to the floor earlier. I'll pick it up. Use the pins that come with the Geissele trigger, because these are what's considered a match pin. They're actually slightly larger and a little bit more concentric, so use those. Alright, so taking the trigger out, same thing. I'm just going to push down on this disconnector up top here, and I'm just going to take that pin out. Then your trigger will lift right out of here. Or it won't lift right out of here because the safety is actually in the way. Alright, so once we get there, with some triggers, the tail on them is a little bit shorter, so you can actually get them around your selector lever. But not this one. This one's making me look like a fool, so I'm going to go ahead and take it out. Alright, what we need first, we'll just take our screwdriver set here. In order to get the selector out, you do have to take the grip off. And this one feels like a flathead in there. And yeah, you can see, so this selector, because this is a cutaway, you can see the detent and spring keeping it in goes right down into the grip. So if we remove the grip, that detent and spring will fall right out. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to try and do it blind here. Alright, so now that that's out of there, as you notice, grip comes off, spring and detent come out. We're going to keep this off until we get the new trigger in. Selector just comes right out now that there's nothing holding it in. Now, this stuff will get out the way. So we got our old fire control group out. Fire control group being the trigger and the hammer and everything that keeps them in. Alright, so let me get the old ones out of the way here. And one of these pins is the old one. Okay. So now, installation of this is pretty much just the reverse order. But what I like to do is take a little bit of grease. I'll use the Brownells Action Lube Plus because it's awesome. And I'll just use something to apply it. I'll just use my punch, actually. And I'll put a little bit on my contact surfaces here. So those 3 spots on the actual trigger. And then I'll apply it again when we get to the hammer. But what you need to do now, so you have your disconnector right here, which is this little piece that's springing up and down. I will remove the pin, but it's also holding that disconnector in, so be mindful of that. Alright, as you can see, just like so. Now I'm going to take this as a whole unit and insert it in. Okay. Now I'm going to push this in from the opposite side, but you'll be able to see what's going on. So I like to grab my hammer shoe, or excuse me, my trigger shoe, pull it down, insert the pin until it comes to a stop, because it's going to come to a stop because this disconnector is no longer lined up. Then I just push the disconnector down to line it up. And usually I'll look through the other end and see if it's aligned, but I don't want to block your view. Alright, so we'll push that in, and then just grab the shoe again as you push the pin in, just to kind of help line everything up. And you're going to want to push it in flush on both sides, and do a little function check. Make sure it's under spring tension. Make sure that disconnector is held in place. Alright, so that looks good. The trigger part is installed. Now for the hammer. Alright, so this is where things get a little bit different. So if you notice, you don't have to take this off. I'm going to take it off just to get it out the way so you can see. If you notice, your hammer post, let me get grease off of my pointing tool. Your hammer post on this side is nice and solid. On this side, it's cut. It has a cutout in it. That's so this little retaining clip can sit on there. I'm going to put it on right now, and then I'm going to redo it so you can see exactly how it goes on there. It sits on just like that. So you just clip it to the actual hammer post, and it only goes on one side. The other clip it comes with is an extra, so just put that in your spare parts kit. And this is never going to come out unless you take it out. Alright, so the way I install that is I take it just like this. So if you notice, the circle kind of starts at that junction right there, and it drops into my grease, okay? And then from there I'm going to fish it out, set it aside, and use the other one for the rest of this video. But if you notice, your straight piece is on one side of the circle for all intents and purposes there, and then you have your circle on the other side. So the circle goes on first, with the straight piece lining up with that cut right there. So we're just going to push it all on there. Push it on as far as we can. And it'll just kind of snap right in place. So yours should look just like that right there. Okay. And yours looks like that with the spring on it, because as I mentioned, you didn't have to take the spring off. So give me a moment just to put this back on here. Alright, so that's how yours will actually look. Okay, so now we can go ahead and install this. Alright, now I did mention grease. We'll put a little bit of grease on this bottom piece here, and then the second spot, and the third spot. Okay, now what we're going to do is we are going to take the legs of this spring, lay it on top of the trigger pin. We're going to push this inward, and we're going to start inserting this pin. Now insert this pin from the opposite side that this clip is on, so you don't have to defeat that clip twice going in. You only have to push it into that final locking place, if that makes sense. Because this pin has 3 cuts in it, okay? So you only want to have to get past it at the initial lock point, if you will. So we're going to push this hammer in. So I like to just take my index finger and my thumb, push it into place. And just kind of wiggle it as I push my pin in. Alright, so now we're at the point where I got to get past that little clip there. And what you can actually do, instead of trying to use your thumb, I just use the biggest punch I have just to kind of give me more leverage on the pin. And you can use anything like the base of a magazine, you know, whatever. There we go. And now that is in place. Now before I do a full function check, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the selector. And this thing is super dry, so I'm just going to put a little bit of grease in there. And to get the selector in, the hammer has to be cocked, okay? Alright, and then spring goes in the grip. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on this detent too, just to act as an adhesive for me, if you will. Not that it's going to help on this cutout, but we'll just slide that into place. Then we'll reinstall our screw. Alright, so that's reinstalled. I'm going to put it on safe, and I'm going to pull the trigger. Alright, nothing should happen except for that little bit of movement right there. That's perfectly normal. I'm going to put it on fire, and it should fire. I'm going to hold down the trigger, push the hammer back till it clicks, slowly let off the trigger, and it should reset just like that. So that's how we know everything's working okay. Now, a two-stage trigger, which is this now, looks like this whenever it works. Comparing that to that one stage we went over earlier, you're going to, so the first stage, if you notice, that is a stage right there. So that is your first stage. And then your second stage is where the sear actually begins to disengage, right? And on these Geissele triggers, it's a very small amount. Very nice, clean, crisp break, which is exactly what you want. So you got your first stage, and then your break. 2 stages. Makes sense? Alright. Installation for this trigger is exactly the same, so we're not going to do it. But it installs the exact same way. Instead of having this stage right here, it's just that trigger basically starts at the second stage and breaks. So that's the 1-stage versus 2-stage Brownell exclusive Geissele trigger, as well as the installation. Alright, so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to post them down below. And as always, if you need help with anything for any reason ever, feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.